Okay, so now we're going to learn how to add and subtract mixed numbers. So mixed numbers, fractions. So you should know how to add fractions by now. So if you haven't, go watch that video. So we have 1 4/9 plus 3 1/9. So this is adding mixed fractions with the same denominator. So in this case, super easy. All you do is add the whole numbers. So 1 plus 3 is 4. And then you add the fractions just like we learned about adding fractions. They have the same denominator, so we simply just add the numerators. 4 plus 1 is 5, and then we keep the same denominator. So 1 plus 3 is 4, then 4 plus 1 is 5, and keep the same denominator. So in this case, the answer is 4 5/9. So that's how you add mixed fractions with the same denominator. Let's do another one. But now we're going to add unlike denominators. So I'm going to write it vertical because it's actually easier to write it vertical and see things. Because when we write it vertical, we have 1 4/9 plus 3 1/3. We can write the equivalent fraction right beside it here, okay? So 3 1/3 and plus 1 4/9. Again, finding least common denominator, I'm going to list my multiples of 9. So 9, I already see that that is a multiple of 3 as well. So I know my denominator is going to be 9. This didn't change, so we're going to just keep it the same. And this over here, we multiplied the denominator by 3, so we need to multiply the numerator by 3. So now we have equivalent fractions. They both have a denominator of 9, so we just do our steps. We add the whole numbers. 1 plus 3 is 4, and then we add the fractions. 4 plus 3 is 7, and then we keep the denominator. Awesome. Let's do another one more. Four 7/8 plus 5 1/4. So again, we have to have a common denominator, so we have to make this the same denominator. Start listing the multiples of 8, and I notice 8, 16. Even before I get to 16, I notice that 8 is a multiple of 4 as well. So I'm going to use 8 for the denominator. This didn't change, so it stays the same. This right here, 4 times 2 gave me 8, so I need to do that to the numerator. We get 2 8s. And now I just follow the steps again. Adding the whole numbers, 4 plus 5 is 9. Then adding the fractions. 7 plus 2 is 9 over 8. Uh-oh, we have an improper fraction. So what you want to do is you want to take this fraction and change it to a mixed number. And then you're going to add it back on to the 9. So 9/8 as a mixed number is 8 goes into 9 one time without going over. And then 1 times 8 is 8, so that means there's 1 left over. So that's my numerator. So now I take this mixed number and I add it back onto the whole number. So I have 1 plus 9, which is 10, and then I have the fraction, 1/8. Okay, so that is how you add fractions. Now let's try subtracting. Same steps. Except you're now just going to subtract the fractions. So 1 17/20 minus 1 3/5. So you're going to find a common denominator. I notice that 20 is a multiple of 5, so I'm just going to use the denominator of 20. Here, it didn't change, so it just stays 17/20. Over here, 5 times 3 gave me 20. So, I mean, not 5 times 3, sorry. 5 times 4 gave me 20. So 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so now I just follow the steps. In this case, in subtraction, you want to subtract the fractions first because there is a thing called borrowing you might do. So 17 minus 12 is 5. and then we keep the same denominator, and then 1 minus 1 is 0. So our answer is 5/20ths, but you know that you can reduce that. So 5/20ths, we can divide that both by 5, and we get 1/4. Let's do one more. Well, one more before I teach you how to borrow or regroup, as you would say it. 3 and 3/4. Okay, so in this case, after I made the equivalent fraction, I'm going to subtract it. 9 minus 2 is 7/12, and then 3 minus 1 is 2. So we have 2 and 7/12. Okay, now I'm going to teach you about regrouping. So let's pretend that we have, well, let's not pretend, let's say that we have 5 and 1/8 minus 3 and 5/8. Okay, so in this case, we have the same denominator, so we don't have to create equivalent fractions. But if you notice, the reason why when subtracting I made you do the fractions first is because we need to do that. You can't do 5 minus 3 first because we need to borrow. Because 1 minus 5 I can't do. So I'm going to borrow from this 5, and I'm borrowing 1 whole, okay? 1 whole. So I have to say to myself, I'm borrowing 1, but how can I write 1 with a denominator of 8? Because I want to write 1 with whatever the denominator is. Well, with a denominator of 8, I can write 1 as 8/8 because 8/8, 8 divided by 8 is 1. I can write a fraction in terms of 1 with any denominator as long as that numerator matches. So 100/100 if the denominators were 100. So 1 can equal, I can change 1 to any type of fraction where the numerator and denominator match. So when I borrowed 1 here, in fraction form with a denominator of 8, I'm actually borrowing 8/8. So I add that to my fraction over here. So 1/8 plus 8/8 becomes 9/8. Okay? And now I can subtract these fractions. I can do 9 minus 5, which is 4, keep the denominator, and then I do 4 minus 3, which is 1. Almost did 5 minus 3. So 4 minus 3 is 1. Then I can reduce this. Divide by 4, divide by 4. So 1 and 1/2. Let's do one more. Okay. 9 and 1/4 minus 1 and 7/16. So this one has different denominators, so we need to change the denominators to the same first. So if I look at the largest one and start doing multiples, even before I start listing its multiples, I see that 4 is a multiple of 16. So I am going to continue to use 16. So 4 times 4 is 16, so 1 times 4 is 4. So I have these fractions, 4/16 minus 7/16, and I can't do that. So I gotta borrow from this 9. And remember, I'm borrowing 1 whole, okay? But in this case, my denominator is 16. So I need to write 1 in terms of with a denominator of 16. Remember, if my numerator matches my denominator, that's 1. So my numerator needs to match, so 16/16. And then that's what I add to this once I borrowed it, because I borrowed it and I'm adding it on to that. So 4/16 is 20. 4 plus 16 is 20. And then we keep the denominator. So now I have 20/16 when I borrowed 1. So 20 minus 7 would give us 13. And we keep the denominator of 16. And then 8 minus 1 is 7. So we get 7 and 13/16, and we don't have to reduce it or anything because it doesn't need reducing. And that is subtraction and addition of mixed fractions and learning how to regroup.